message is very, very simple. We want to educate the kids, not indoctrinate them.
She doesn't want these projects in her backyard, in Warringah. She wants them in yours.
What's wrong with Australia today?
For me, it's leadership. There's just a lack of leadership.
We should be energy independent here in Australia. We've got everything.
And it's good to see the community come out and really engage in this issue of parental rights.
You only have one vote, but it's very powerful.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Commanding the Narrative. My name is Stephen Tripp. Thank you for joining us. If you're watching us live on Facebook, Rumble and YouTube, we've got a big episode today. We did one of these a couple of weeks back with Katie, Stephen and Jim, but this renewable energy problem that's happening out in regional communities is a big problem. So there's a lot of different people out there with different stories to tell. But before we get straight into it, I just want to let you know, as I do every time, if you want to support what we're doing here at Commanding the Narrative, you can head to Buy Me a Coffee and throw a few dollars at us there if you choose. It's much appreciated if you do choose to do so. But I guess we should get into it because it's going to be a big episode today and a lot of information. I have Emma Bowman and also Grant Piper. I might start with you first, Grant, because you're the chair of the National Rational Energy Network, and that was basically set up as a collective of all the smaller groups around the country that are facing these issues with renewable energy projects. How did you first get involved in all of this?
It started probably 2018, 2019 when we found out Transgrid were planning a power line, a dual 500 kilowatt power line running from the Hunter Valley west into what is now the middle of the Renewable Energy Zone. But the Renewable Energy Zones didn't exist then. And the neighbour told us about it and we weren't aware of it. There'd always been a wind farm planned or project planned north of Coolah. And that's the only thing we thought was happening around the district. So we were quite ignorant, really. And so we got involved fighting that Transgrid power line back then. And in 2020, through the work of the Merrill-Cassis Alliance, they finally got Transgrid sacked from the job. And we thought, beauty, job done, and came home, had a beer on the veranda. And then we found out there was a second wind project planned west of us on the next ridge west. And so then we got involved with that, trying to find out what was going on. And then November 2020, and I'd heard it on the radio talked about before that, and I didn't understand what it was, but November 2020, the New South Wales Parliament passed the Energy Infrastructure Act 2020, which established the REZs and stood up energyco, took it off the shelf to do the development of the REZs and the power lines, the transmission, and that dumped us into a REZ zone, a renewable energy zone, which didn't exist before. And so ever since then, we've been fully engaged trying to stop it, because obviously with that hanging over your head, your business uncertainty, the impact on your livelihood and where you choose to live and your family and everything is immense. And so we've been full at it since then.
Yeah, it's a ongoing battle, isn't it? But Emma, you've got a unique story. You're on a farm out at Dunedoo. And your family's been there for 200 years, is that right?
Yeah, my family's been in this district for over 200 years.
And what do you farm out there?
So we run merino sheep and we run cattle, and we do a little bit of cropping as well. Our current property is split by the double Golden Highway, Castlereagh Highway. So I know what it's like to deal with government authorities and all of the fun things that come with that.
Yeah, definitely. And how did you get involved with the renewable stuff? When did that first pop up on your radar?
Oh, so probably for a couple of years, after we learnt of being in the Central West Orana Renewable Energy Zone, got a little bit involved, but, there wasn't a lot happening. So just keeping an eye on it. And then probably 8, 10, 12 months ago, I really went down the rabbit hole when I realised how energyco was treating transmission affected landowners, because when the Golden Highway upgrade was announced, we were approached by the then RMS, who is now Transport for New South Wales, and they played the compulsory acquisition card with us then. So I know what that feels like. I know how hard we had to fight to stop from being steamrolled. And so, yeah, I really felt for those like Grant who are affected by the transmission and who don't have a choice. And I suppose it's escalated from there to the rabbit hole you find me in today.
Well, I guess we should explain exactly what we're talking about when we're talking about these renewable energy zones. A lot of people in the cities might not exactly understand what it all means, but as you can see on the map of New South Wales here, there's quite a few of them. There's 5, in fact. I don't think they've got really the Illawarra one completely on there yet, but you can see here the Australian Capital Territory, the ACT, and how small it is compared to these renewable energy zones. It's a really good comparison on the size of these zones. And the Central West Orana zone is where you guys are based. If we go down to that, in the you can see all the projects that are planned and the land that's going to be acquired and used for all these projects. I mean, the scale of it is really quite immense, isn't it?
It is. I mean, the area it covers, there's 5 reses in New South Wales. Central West Orana res is the lead res. So what they're doing here is what will follow elsewhere. And yeah, I mean, it's already grown. It was gazetted initially, I think, at 3 gigawatt, and now it's up to 4.5 gigawatt with a plan to go to 6 gigawatt. And we've seen documentation stating 20 gigawatt of installed capacity. And if you add up all the projects we've got listed at the moment, wind and solar, it adds up to something like 14 gigawatt right now. They haven't built that, but that's what's already listed as active projects within the zone. And in the EIS that energyco put out the end of last year, they say it'll change the area from agricultural to fundamentally industrial in nature. And so it is going to change the environment massively over the next decades, and it will affect food production, and it will affect the whole ecology of the area. It's just a massive change.
And these take in a lot of towns: Wellington, Dubbo, Mudgee, Coolah. You know, we mentioned Dunedoo, Gilgandra. I mean, a lot of communities are getting affected by this one res alone. I mean, we haven't even touched on the other 4. So, Emma, have you been mixing with the locals? What are they saying about it? Are there people that are for this, or is it majority against this? What's the feeling on the ground for you?
Oh, look, Stephen, I think there is major community division over what is happening. So there's different groups of people that are in different situations that have different feelings about it. You know, there's host landowners, so those who are going to host wind or solar projects who are getting very well compensated for that, signing up for their agreements. There's probably some people that would like to host wind or solar projects that don't have appropriate land. So, you know, they're probably a bit annoyed about that. Then there's those who are being forced to host transmission lines. You know, a lot of them probably against their will, that aren't being adequately compensated. So they're not very happy. And then there's the people that just want no part of it, any of the projects, any of the transmission. And I think there are still a lot of people who don't know much about the Central West Orana res, even though they live in it. So there's huge community division, and our communities thrive on volunteers and everyone working together. So it's going to be a big issue going forward for rural and regional New South Wales, and probably Australia too. How are these towns, villages going to survive if people won't work together? Because, you know, there's there's underlying issues there, and they're big issues. People that don't want to be the neighbour to a wind project or a solar project, but their neighbours sign up without telling them. Like, it's, we have boundary fences with these people. You have to do things in the community with each other. It's causing massive issues.
Yeah, and a lot of division amongst communities that were probably happy living with each other and lived with each other for a very, very long time.
Mostly, yeah. Like, everyone has their differences of opinion, and everyone doesn't ever get along completely. But generally, we've been a fairly cohesive rural community. My community, and I know Coolah similar, and Gulgong, and I honestly fear this could tear us apart. And I mean, it's not that many years ago we suffered through the Sir Ivan bushfire in this area in 2017, and the community that rallied around those landowners affected and the things that were done for people behind the scenes was massive to try and get affected landowners back on their feet. And, they're still struggling now, but the community cohesiveness that made that happen, I wonder if that would happen again now, because, has that been irreparably damaged?
Yeah. Now, Grant, Emma mentioned some of these, wind projects and solar projects are on people's land, and they're quite happy to do so because they get payment for it. But I've heard recently about this decommissioning, and there's some properties that in the contract it says that the company that's installing these projects are responsible for the decommissioning, but some of the contracts don't have anything about it. So that would mean that the decommissioning of these projects, which essentially means having to tear them down and restore the land to what it was before, would be the responsibility of the farmer. Can you shed some light on that? Maybe clarify exactly what's happening with the decommissioning?
Well, it's hard to know exactly. I'm not 100% sure what the deal is. What I gather at the moment, yes, there is no legislated bond system in place like there is for the mines for the rehabilitation of the land afterward. So, and when we had a community meeting and the Tilt representatives were there, and when we asked them this last year, they said, "Oh no, that's written into the landowner agreement with the proponent." And I said, "Oh, what is that?" And they said, "We can't tell you because it's commercially in confidence." So, I haven't read a contract with a landowner to see what's actually in it. So you may have more information than me, or Emma may have access to one. But then just a week or two ago, Emma might correct me on this too, I think it was the Premier Mins in questioning and budget estimates said that, "Oh no, that's encapsulated in the landowner payment," I think, or words to that effect. So
Yep.
At some level of government, or the top of New South Wales government, their assumption is it's built into the payments the landowner gets. Now, I haven't seen or heard any further clarification of that, of what exactly that is, but I think that would disappoint a lot of landowners, because I don't think they would have been aware of that up front if that's meant to be paid, built into their payments. And this is the problem with the whole system: is the horse is bolted, and they're not even trying to shut the gate now, but they're trying to sort of, grab hold of the reins as it goes past, because that the proponents were already out in the area, spruiking wind and solar and signing up hosts with confidential options agreements that they couldn't discuss with their neighbours or anyone before the RES was even announced. And since the RES is announced, they're always prospecting new areas. And so from the time they sign up that first landowner, the division is sown in the community and irreparable damage is done, because some of the community want this stuff to go ahead, but they're not allowed to talk to anyone, not even allowed to tell their neighbour about it. And then the rest of the community is kept in the dark. And then the first they know about it is when the proponent will have a consultation or community information session in the bowling club or somewhere in town. And you go along and you find all these maps and you find all these plans, and it's sold to you as a done deal. Like, "Oh no, this is going ahead, it's all a done deal." And 99% of the population didn't know anything about it. And they're being told it's a done deal. And now that's the second step of the full consultation, which has been well spoken about and identified. But the first step was things like passing the Electricity Infrastructure Act in November 2020 through both houses of Parliament in 17 days at the end of 2020. And now everybody then was preoccupied with COVID. No one was paying attention to legislation. There was no community consultation before announcing that. So again, the consultation has been led by the government poorly, and it's just continued in the same vein ever since with EnergyCo. And proponents, well, they just use the same playbook they use everywhere around the world. They use the same words, the same techniques. And so that's what has to stop. They shouldn't go prospecting into an area before everybody in that area has had a chance to inform themselves or be informed about what's coming, not just turn up and deliver it as a done deal.
And in some of the information, I can't remember which one of you sent it to me, but you're talking about these community meetings that they have with EnergyCo presenting what they're going to do with the communities, and they'll have a map of where they're going to have all the projects, but you guys are not allowed to keep a copy of the map. So they present the information, but you're not allowed to take that away with you. Is that the case?
I think a lot.
They certainly go on.
Sorry. I think generally speaking, a lot of maps, especially with the transmission project, when there was a wide study corridor and no one really knew exactly where the lines were going to go, EnergyCo would approach landowners who are under the study corridor, and Grant can probably speak to this better than me because he is one of them. But they would go there with a map and put it in front of the landowner and say, this is what we're going to do on your property. Oh, but sorry, you can't keep that. So no one could put a full, a whole picture together of what was actually happening, because you couldn't go to your neighbor and say, well, this is where they're going on my place, or this is where they're going on your place. And then they were telling, groups of landowners that, oh, the ones down that end of the project, they're happy about it, they're fine. When, what was that totally true? I doubt it. But you go to a lot of these sessions, community information sessions, and it is literally just informing the community what they are going to do. It's not generally asking us what we would like done or how we would like to see it happen. It's basically like Grant said, it's rolled out and said, well, this is what we're doing, so tough luck in a sense. And
then they'll go away from that saying we've consulted with the community and they're happy with it, where it's not really any consulting at all. It's basically just dictating, this is the plan, this is the route, and this is the map here, and you guys just need to be happy about it and smile about it. Basically, is that the general feel that you feel when you walk away?
Well, it is. I mean, we got a bit more active in the meetings and tried to drive the agenda of the meetings to extract more information. But yes, last year, for example, I mean, the scoping report for the power line in our area that was affecting us had an alignment that didn't change for about 6 months, when on the ground we knew that the alignment was different to what was on the map, on the website, or the interactive map. I mean, they don't want to give you a paper copy, but they have an interactive map on the website somewhere that you can go to. But in that case, it was up to 6 months behind the reality on the ground, so it's of little use. And they do things maliciously from the get-go, because EnergyCo is sort of a virtual company. It was legislated in '87. It was stood up for this project and manned with people out of DPIE, but it didn't have sufficient staff, or it doesn't have real staff and real expertise in building power lines, because traditionally that's always been done by Transgrid. And so they used all these contractors, contractors basically to come out and do the on the ground work. So the land acquisition person that comes to talk to you is contracted to do that job. And you think initially, I'm talking to EnergyCo, I'm talking to the New South Wales state government. But no, you're talking to a contractor who's paid with some, scheme to get the job over the line. And then the land acquisition fellow that you're talking to won't be allocated to your neighbours. They always divide. So he'll have people he talks to that he's negotiating with, but none of them will be adjoining landowners. They'll have another land acquisition person speaking to the other property. So even your neighbour, you're never talking to the same guy. You deal with one person, he deals with another, but they make sure that they're not a continuous link right along the power line. They do that. And yesterday, I escorted the Valuer General's valuers around the property, and they're a contractor. They're Urbis, and that's all they do is compulsory acquisition for the government. And I said, "Oh, who else have you visited, or where have you been?" I was looking over the fence at the neighbour, and I said, "Oh, you've been to Armstrong's already?" And they go, "Oh, no, because they've done the same thing. They divide it up. They'll send a different valuer to my neighbour." So they separate all the way. And this divide and conquer mindset and whatever it takes mindset permeates the whole system these days, with the contractors who are paid to do a job and with the government, I think, and whoever their advisors are. I mean, it's a whole structural, it's a systemic problem in that the attitude is, if I just talk enough, if I just push enough, if I just keep going and never surrender, we'll get our way. And that's all it's about, is about getting their way. It's not about finding the best solution or taking extra advice on board and going, "Oh, we hadn't thought of that. We'll change what we're doing." That doesn't seem to be in their makeup. There's no off ramp. There's no reverse gear.
Yeah, we should probably establish who this EnergyCo is. Now, it's the Energy Corporation of New South Wales, and it's a statutory authority established under the, as you said, the Energy and Utilities Administration Act of 1987. You just spoke of what your dealings with EnergyCo have been like. But my question is, I mean, recently in the last few years or so, the New South Wales government sold Ausgrid for a lot of money. What's the likelihood that one day, once all these renewable energy zones are in place, that they'll sell off EnergyCo, and who knows who they could sell it to? Maybe Grant, you can.
Yep. Well, EnergyCo, yeah, I think EnergyCo will stay there in the background, just guessing, but they've already got a shortlist, or they've a preferred contractor to build the power lines and operate the power lines for 25 years, and that's ACE, which is a consortium of a Spanish firm, Acciona is it, and a French infrastructure firm, and some small percentage of holding is an Australian company, I think, but mainly it's dominated by this French and Spanish firm. So they've already shortlisted them to build and operate for 25 years. And that company, like Transgrid, is legislated a given return on that infrastructure. So they build it, they're guaranteed to get their money back for building it, and then they're guaranteed a percentage profit or a percentage return on that infrastructure. That's how it works in the national electricity market at the moment. I mean, Transgrid, all these people that build and operate these lines get a guaranteed return on. So if they gold plate, and if they bump the price up and it costs twice what it should cost, they get a percentage of that. So it's not in their interest to try and not build it. It's not in their interest to try and do what's best value for the citizen or the consumer. It's in their interest to pad the cost as much as possible and then get a guaranteed return from us as well. And EnergyCo, yeah, I don't know whether they'll wind it up. I think it'll sit there. They'll put it back on the shelf if they deactivate it, just like they have since '87. But yeah, they don't want any of this infrastructure owned and operated by the public anymore. They just contract it, sell it out to the highest bidder or the lowest bidder or what have you, and then they get a guaranteed return. And all the projects, wind and solar, they're all private. Obviously, that's a sort of a separate issue.
Well, I guess we probably should talk about the extent or the amount of projects that are going to happen, just specifically within the res that the Central West Orana area that you guys are in. Now it covers 20,000 square kilometers. That's 2 million hectares of which a lot of that's prime agricultural land. I mean, you can just go on the website and look at the interactive map and scroll into some of these areas, and you can see the farmland there. It's not barren desert or anything like that. I mean, it's prime farmland. But you both have put together some very good presentations that I guess you've been taking to community events. So I'll share a little bit from both of them, but this is Emma's. And maybe I'll get some comments from you, Emma, about the amount of wind projects. Now, this is you did tell me this is probably a little bit out of date now. You've got 11 projects on here. Grant's found 12, but you can see the amount of turbines that are going into each project, and the amount of land that's going to take. This is not including the transmission lines that are going to be crisscrossing the countryside to link up to all these projects. So, I mean, do people really understand the scale of what's going to happen once all these projects are completed, Emma?
No, I really don't think so, Stephen. And I think it takes a lot to understand that, because the EnergyCo interactive map is literally the only place that you can find all of those things in the one place. But the trouble is, all EnergyCo has done is put the 11 projects, the boundaries of the 11 projects that are going to connect to the new transmission infrastructure on there. So you can't really see what it will actually look like until you do a map for yourself. And I know, to find out all that information myself, it took hours and hours of trawling through the planning portal, and Grant's wife Annette would have done the same thing, because none of it's in exactly the same spot. You've got to trawl through each individual project yourself. And I think, I probably thought not so long ago that, no one's just done that. But I think it's a deliberate ploy by the government to not show anyone what this will actually look like, and how much agricultural land and how much of an impact that will be on our food and fiber production, because that scares the shit out of me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the other thing as well, like look at the amount of projects that are just, this is just the wind projects, right? So there's other solar projects and battery projects and etc. But
Yeah.
you guys are on the land, like you guys are working hard. I mean, farming's a full-time job, and then you have to spend your time digging through all this government legislation and different documents to try and find all this stuff. How do you find the time to go through all this and keep up with it all?
Look, honestly, it's tough. Late nights, early mornings, days that things don't happen on the farm that should. I mean, I've got a list of jobs as long as my arm, probably my legs, that haven't been done, because to me, like, obviously the everyday jobs get done because you just have to do them, that they don't wait. But things like replacing fences or fixing fences or like that sort of stuff doesn't get done. So we then get behind. I'm very lucky that my semi-retired parents are still very active and they live on the place too. So they're very helpful, and my partner is here full time. So that gives me a little bit of leeway, but this is not what I planned to be spending my time on. This is, I'm a year 10 dropout. I'm a busted ass farmer. This isn't where my passion lies or what I want to be doing with my time. But at the same time, I don't think I can let this go until I've given it a red hot crack at protecting agriculture in rural and regional New South Wales and Australia, because this is all I know. Like I said, I left school at the end of year 10 to come home because this is all where I wanted to be. And, I love my livestock. I love farming. I don't know what else I'd do with myself, but I also don't want to look out. We have a wonderful view from my home. We're very, very fortunate, but we're going to have a view of turbines as far as the eye can see, and we will see solar. And I don't think my father didn't work his whole life to give us what he's given us to then sit in his chair and look out at that. And he's gutted.
Is this an artist representation of what it could look like?
So this
This
is
is
a
just a
photo.
power line.
Yeah, so this is a photo montage that was in the CWOREZ transmission EIS. Yeah, so that is two 500 kV lines. You will notice in that photo that they don't take out the vegetation when they do all those montages. So it's very disconcerting that, you know, that isn't actually what it's going to look like. All those
Yeah,
trees are
well, yeah, all those trees get bulldozed to the ground, don't they?
Yeah, that's right. And that next one that you showed, it was so that is from someone's home, and I think that is it's about 200 meters, might be a little bit further, 250 meters from that person's house. Like that's pretty devastating.
And just on the left-hand side, it looks like a little substation. Is that what that is?
Yeah. So that is a substation, and interestingly enough, that one has been moved. But yes, it was
But
originally
I've
there.
seen plenty of substations in my time. They're not going to look that small. They're going to have high fences and all the way around. I mean, it's not going to be just tiny like that.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, this is probably a little bit off topic, but I mean, you've been on the farm for I mean, your family's been on your farm for 200 years. I'm sure you have a connection to that land as a family. I mean, this might be a little bit of a hard question, but how is that impacting you guys emotionally, having to face these issues and the community as well? Do you find people that are really struggling with this mentally?
Oh, absolutely. Like it's tough. Like I said, I came home because this is what I always wanted to do. I'm terrible at going on holidays. I hate being away from home. So this is what I know, this is what I love. And it's pretty devastating to think that this will all change to, like Grant said earlier, an industrial area, because this is a beautiful valley. This whole area is so productive, and yeah, there's a lot of people really struggling with that. I actually, a couple of concerned community members, we put out a survey about mental health a few weeks ago, and the results are really scary. Like 66% of people are saying that they've got anxiety induced by the CWOREZ. Huge percentage of increased stress. There's increased violence in the home. There's suicidal tendencies. There's thoughts of harming others. Like that really scares me. And I think if we lose even one person because of this, that's too many, and that's not acceptable. And I think that comes from not consulting us before this was all just rolled out, and to call it the rapid transition to renewables, like it is obviously rapid, and it's obviously not very well thought through when we see what happens on the ground. And people are being lied to and bullied, and it's just, yeah, it's been rolled out really, really poorly.
Yeah, I mean, this is the time. I mean, you make the time because we see it as a priority. This is almost, it's an existential threat almost. I mean, it's destroying your life and your business and your family's, where your family has been and where your current family is, and you hope that they'll be there in the future. And yeah, things fall behind, like things around the farm aren't being done. And we just hope that, yeah, we've got to prioritise once again. And it is frustrating because obviously none of us get paid to do this, whereas we're combating people that are getting paid full time and probably very good money to come and push this stuff through. There's a lot of anxiety and stress. I mean, I'm tired, and you talk to most people and talk to Emma. I mean, everyone we're dealing with on our side admits to being tired, and there's no end point. Like, where is the end point? We have what we think sometimes is a bit of a win, or things are going in the right direction. And I think the overall, I don't know what you call it, the political wins and economic wins are moving in our direction. But on the ground, they haven't stopped to reconsider their position and the stupidity of what they're actually trying to implement and whether it makes any sense, environmentally, economically, or even technically. It's all driven by ideology. And I know we're probably going off topic, but that's the attitude you get. It's not being preceded by rational people for rational reasons. It's all ideology. Look, I don't know how to. There's no fixing it. Say from the time the first host was signed up, the division in the community was there, and that's not going to be fixed. If we win and this stuff isn't built, the people that were counting on or starting to budget for this money coming in are going to be cheesed off. And if they win, well, sure as hell, we're going to be cheesed off as well, and we have to reconsider our future. And this is having a real impact right now on food production, and it is having a real impact right now on mental health, if you want to call it that. And everyone handles that in their own way, and some people don't handle it as well as others. And there will be consequences. I mean, honestly, before this is over, if it doesn't stop, there will be blood at some point. I'm not threatening, and I'm not, I'm just saying, given the angst in the community, there will be a pressure release at some point, and I won't personally be surprised at that.
It's I mean, they're just pushing ahead with these projects without any consideration of that, and a lot of these are coming from city electorates, from teal electorates and green electorates, and some Labor electorates, and even some Liberal people that are right behind this stuff. But how many of those members of Parliament have been out to your areas to consult with you guys, or even come out and have a look at your farmland and what's being proposed? I mean, I want to bring up this image here that you've sent through, Grant. I mean, this is the base of a wind turbine. You can see the amount of steel that's going into this, and the amount of concrete that will eventually go into this. I mean, this footing is never going to be removed. It is going to be in that land forever. No one's going to come along with a whole crew of blokes with jackhammers to try and excavators to try and dig this stuff out. I mean, it's going to be there permanently, and one day this wind farm will be decommissioned. And a lot of these only last 20 years or so. I mean, you're really leaving an impact on the land that's going to be permanent.
Yeah, I mean, I can't quote you what the CO2 produced with concrete is, but they keep telling us that concrete's one of the worst producers of CO2, and so that's why the cost of concrete's increased, and they've shut down concrete plants, cement plants around. But this is the hypocrisy of the whole thing, is that why are we doing this, or why are they trying to do this? Trying to do this to save the planet, supposedly. But when you look at the sunk energy and materials and minerals and manufacturing and transport and everything that goes into building this stuff, shipping it and installing it, and that base, for example, it's completely counterproductive. It's bringing consumption forward to now, whereas if you had just burnt the fossil fuel used to transport, mine, manufacture that stuff in the most efficient way possible, where you needed it, you would create less pollution overall. I mean, those turbines only work at 30% of their nameplate capacity. That's from AMO data in 2022. Solar farms only work at less than 20% of their nameplate capacity. So you've got to massively overbuild what you build to get the megawatts out of it that you need. Now, if we consume 10 gigawatt of power a day in New South Wales, and if we're going to continue to consume that, well, you need to build 6 or 8 times that in renewable, and then you still need to back it up with gas turbines or thermal power plants to stabilise the grid and cover those times when the wind doesn't blow or the sun sets. So you can build as many turbines and solar panels as you like, but you need the equivalent in backup ready to go when the sun goes down, the wind stops. And then the batteries, they float the battery idea. But then the environmental cost of mining and manufacturing batteries, which have even a shorter life than the turbines, completely demolishes any environmental credentials that the so-called renewable generators have, because batteries don't generate power. And the same thing goes for green hydrogen, they say. Now, we don't have a lot of water in Australia, so that's another problem. But the round trip efficiency of hydrogen is something like 28%. If you're going to generate hydrogen from water using electrolysis, using solar and wind, if you've got an excess through the middle of the day, and then you burn it in a gas turbine, it's only about 28% efficient. So once again, and you've got to overbuild the solar and wind to produce enough hydrogen to run your gas turbine generator. You'd be better off burning natural gas directly in your generator. So technically, this thing is bereft of any sense whatsoever. It is basically inefficient. It is almost the most, and then you've got to build transmission lines to get a distributed generation source back to your load centres, such as your city and your heavy industry, which is a complete reversal. You've got to rebuild the grid back to front, inside out. And that cost and expense and environmental impact and impact on us wouldn't be there if you weren't trying to build this distributed generation system. So you couldn't think of a least inefficient way to generate power. I mean, this is like they've ticked every box for doing crazy stuff or trying to do crazy stuff to generate power. And that's what gets me, really. I mean, you could suck it up if it actually worked. It might be for the greater good if it actually worked. But at a fundamental level, it does not work. And that's what the inner city electorates and the Teals and those people need to understand. They need to look at it from the whole of life perspective and educate themselves and realise that it doesn't work and it is counterproductive. It's the same people taking advantage. It's the financial industry, it's the commodity trading industry, it's the big generators that want big projects, the big infrastructure builders. It's all the same people that have been driving, we complain about driving decisions in government over the decades. It's the same people with a greenwash, over the top, trying to sell it to you as for the greater good. And so all I can say is for you down there and where you live, those people just need to open their eyes and look at the reality and not just listen to look at the glossy brochures or the 3-word slogans on the steps of Parliament or something. I mean, they need to actually genuinely look at this and realise it won't do what they've been told it's meant to do.
Well, what's really strange for me is obviously we know what the Teals are selling the public, the messaging that they're, we're saving the world by going renewable and we need to stop coal because it's heating the atmosphere. And I mean, all these messages have been drummed into us for 20 years, 25 years, whatever it might have been. We know that, we've got that in our head. But when I go to the energyco website and I go to their frequently asked questions page, and they're talking about why they're doing this and like this energy transition, all these questions here about energy transition and transitioning from coal to renewables. Climate change is not mentioned on here. It's all about modernizing the electricity grid, and that we're going to be, we have 5 coal power plants in New South Wales. 4 of them are going to be closed in the next 15 years. So we need to modernize the electricity network by going to renewables. But there's nothing on here about, not that I've seen, maybe I've skimmed through it too quickly, but there's nothing on here that mentions anything about climate change. I mean, isn't that the sole purpose that we're doing this? Isn't that the sole reason that we're going down this path? There's not, I can't, I mean, as I said, maybe I've skimmed through it too quickly and I've missed it, but I can't see anything on here about it.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, I can't say I've read that page, but every bit of documentation they send out in the preamble to the EIS and the letters they send to us and the brochures when they send an update, the first paragraph always waxes lyrical about we're transforming, to a cleaner, less emissions intensive future. I mean, it's all predicated on reducing emissions on all the documentation they send out to us. And that's been the lead reason, if you read that stuff all the time. And it's interesting, not in the FAQ, because, jumping ahead to the National Electricity Law and even energyco's objects when it was legislated, and even AEMO's objects, the objectives were safe, reliable, affordable, industry development, export opportunities. Those are all the reasons, all the things that the electricity grid has to satisfy, being safe, cheap and affordable, basically. That's what has to be, and reliable. That's what it has to be. Emissions was not added as an objective, despite the government signing, up to treaties overseas and things like that. The legislation for the National Electricity Law was not amended until September 23 to include emissions as an objective. And the New South Wales legislation was not changed until November 2020 with the Emissions Reduction Act 2020, whatever it was called, in November 2023, to legislate that whatever it is, 80 or 90% by 2030, or 70% by 2035. And that's the first legislation in New South Wales that has actually said that we've got to reduce emissions, and that's what our transition is doing it. So prior to that, you could say that energyco, AEMO, and all these other agencies have been pushing the emissions reduction transition, have been acting outside their legislated purpose, because there was no legislation telling them that was one of their objectives, and now it is. And but in the second reading and in Parliament, they made a point of emphasising that emissions goal did not have any priority over the pre-existing goals. They would be treated were to be treated equally, and you could even argue that the same goals that we've had for 40 or 50 years have some priority over the emissions goal that was only a Johnny-come-lately, if you like. So it's interesting the FAQs don't mention it, because in all their other documentation they do.
Yeah, it's just it was a head scratcher for me, because I'm like, well, that's the key, the reason, motivation behind doing all this. Well, why wouldn't you put that front and center? But I just want to shift to you, Emma. I mean, we're talking. I mean, Grant mentioned the glossy brochures, and the glossy brochures will show a wind turbine that's already up and solar panels that are already established. But as you would know, as Grant would know, and as a lot of other people in these communities would know, there's a tremendous amount of construction that goes into these, and the I guess the carbon footprint, you might say, from that construction would be incredibly high. You've actually gone into the weeds a little bit and analyzed some of these things, especially when it comes to roads and transport. And as you said, you have a major road that goes through your property, so it's going to be, once these projects are well underway, you're going to have a tremendous amount of road vehicles, plant from construction sites coming through, floats of all different materials. And I mean, we've seen the footage of these wind turbines being transported into little towns with little roads. I've actually got a question here from Pauline, and you might be able to answer this. She's asked, are the roads still an issue for the transportation of the turbines? Do you have a comment on that? Because we've seen these turbines that are hundreds of meters long, or whatever they might be. How do you get them around all the little roads in these regional areas?
Well, that's a very good question, and one that I've been asking for a very long time and probably still haven't got an adequate answer to. There are some major issues even getting, so the new turbines that are so tall, their blades are so long that there is a lot of issues getting them along the Golden Highway from the Port of Newcastle to even Merriwa. So I don't really know what they're going to do. I understand energyco, they have a memorandum of understanding with Transport for New South Wales, and they are in talks with Transport for New South Wales about what they are going to do with the Golden Highway, because every turbine that comes to the CWOREZ, so every blade will have to go through the main street of the town of Merriwa. So then a lot of them will also go through the main street of the town of Dunedoo. There are others that will go through Gulgong. There's Denman Bridge, which they can't get those long turbines over. My understanding is, someone told me the other day, there are 4 bridges on the Golden Highway that will have to be upgraded before those turbine blades can come through.
We have another question from Pauline that I guess is along those lines. What costs are involved in the road upgrades? The government needs to be transparent and show all related costings. Are they doing that? Are they showing the costings of how much the road upgrades are going to take? I mean, and that's again adding to the carbon footprint. You're meant to be reducing carbon dioxide, but I mean, you want to install wind turbines and solar panels and batteries and high voltage lines, but you got to upgrade the roads and everything around these areas as well.
Well, that's right, and I like it's the same thing. Like Pauline, I've been asking the same question for a long time as well. I do understand there's an organisation that has done their own investigation into the Golden Highway, the upgrades, the cost, how long it would take. I haven't seen it released yet, but I think it's meant to be released this month. But yeah, government, they seem to be sweeping it under the carpet and just saying, oh, it's okay, we'll get it done. But to me, none of this construction can start until the roadworks are complete. Can you imagine the frustration of drivers on the Golden Highway, one being stuck at roadworks, and then two being stuck behind oversized, overmass vehicles? There are already enough accidents on this Golden Highway, and I think the frustration will only lead to more carnage. How are they going to guarantee the safety of other local road users, people like me who cross our stock across the highway? I mean, it's a disaster waiting to happen. But things like this just, cumulative effects, the sum total of what all of this means for our area, it just gets swept aside as if, oh no, we'll fix that as it happens. Well, to me, what's happened with the transmission project is a great example of how you can screw it up royally without fixing it from the start. So I honestly don't know how this is even physically possible to roll this out the way they are.
We haven't touched on, the amount of solar projects as well. This is the solar projects that you've got listed, 27 projects, plus smaller installations as well. These are the battery projects that are listed. So, what's your gut feeling with all of this? Maybe get comment from you, Grant. Do you think that we'll end up with more projects or less? Do you think they'll keep adding projects on, or do you think once the reality hits home and you can't find the workers and you can't find the money to build all these things, and maybe some of the community anger and the pushback really starts to gather some momentum, where do you see all of this going?
All right. Just backing up a bit. I mean, we've identified 1,024 turbines in the current project. So that's 3 blades each. So it's over 3,000 blades, 90 meters. And I think Emma and they calculate like 100 oversized over mass loads per day or per night. And they floated the idea of basically quarantining the highway so they'd move all these oversized loads at night. And then you talk to obviously the truck drivers here that cart our grain down and cart our fertilizer back or whatever else is needed or stock. I mean, they do a lot of those, and all the fuel that comes out here, there's a constant line of tankers bringing fuel west, and then the trucks going back. So you couldn't then jam all that normal freight movement into the day. And they wonder, well, how are we going to operate and how are we going to get cattle to market and all the other stuff if they start moving all these oversized overmass lines on what is just a 2-lane road most of the way. There's the odd overtaking lane, but it's not dual carriageway. It's just a country, really a wide country lane road, but it's still only got 2 lanes. Yeah, and the the Midwestern Council based in Mudgee, I mean, they put out a report and yeah, they basically identify all the physical shortcomings, the impediments to actually doing what the projected plan is. And so that leads into what I think. Now, I don't think the AMO integrated system plan was ever intended to be built as it is currently mapped out. I think it was just an ambit sort of gambit that they put out there. But the physical reality is, and I'm sure there's some smart people somewhere in the system that know this, that they could never actually build it as it was. But then if they only get 50% of it, it's still 50% too much. But they go for 150% to start with, if you like. And so I think that's part of it. and it's this virtue signaling mentality they had, that you've got to announce big so it gets all over the news, and you can tell all your friends and all the people overseas that, oh no, look what we're doing for climate change. And then they endeavour to build it, and all the problems are in the way. But I don't think they ever intended to build it as it is. But as I said at the beginning, the Central West Orana REZ, unfortunately, is the lead REZ. So by the time the economic and political reality sinks in, we might be roadkill, and these 54 projects might well be underway like they are around Wellington at the moment, and the odd one elsewhere. So unfortunately, we're the lead REZ. So by the time they change direction, we might be, severely affected, even if they never build the final version of the REZ. If it does go ahead and they do build the final version of the REZ, well, this is only the tip of the iceberg. This is just the thin edge of the wedge, the current 54 projects.
Yeah, you hit on a good point there, that it may just be they announce these things at election time, and they say, look what we're doing, and they hit the electorate with all these big numbers and everything that goes along with that. But once they actually get into the construction phase, they might quietly just hush cancel some of these projects and downscale it. Well, we can only hope that maybe that is what happens, because I mean, as you said, there's projects that are underway right now that haven't been stopped. So it's a real fight, isn't it? It must be for you guys having to face this non-stop. I mean, it must be just a roller coaster ride for you guys.
Well, I don't know, it's a roller coaster, but yeah, it's all downhill. I mean, you'd much prefer to be doing something else. Production is already affected before they built anything, because I mean, I'm here talking to you, and I'm not out doing what I'm meant to be doing. And so people caught in limbo aren't maintaining their farms or aren't working their farms, or you've got hosts counting on some big check coming through the mailbox one day, and so they stop, they take their foot off the pedal as well. So yeah, it's a massive amount of lost productivity if anybody wants to do the sums on that. All these, it's the unintended consequence, or it's just not considered. But all this anxiety and misspent time and effort and money is all created by the government. Now, if everybody was working productively and not being thrown these curveballs by the government all the time, I mean, what a different place the country would be.
Yeah.
But we keep getting thrown these weird things that come out of Macquarie Street, and you go, where the hell did that come from? It should never have seen the light of day.
I mean, that's the tragedy of it all. The amount of money that's going into all of this, where it could have been directed into so many other avenues that could have really been great big nation building projects for the country and really benefited the people here. But it's being squandered, really. I mean, Emma, you kind of touched on it a little bit before. I think you mentioned bushfires, but how prone are these areas? I mean, we look at the whole Central West Orana area, and we're not even talking about the other REZ areas that are going on around New South Wales. But how prone are these areas to bushfire, flood, any sort of natural disaster that could potentially damage these installations? You think of a solar project that covers a huge amount of land. What happens if a flood comes through there?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Stephen. So, like, there are fires in this area every year. Obviously, the last massive one was Sir Ivan in 2017. There was a couple of years before that, there was a big one up near Coonabarabran, which is also in the Warrumbungle Shire Council. There was a massive one that ran from, I think, out near Cobra, so to the west of Dunedoo, through Birrawar in 1979. That goes through a lot of the area that is affected by transmission lines. We've been absolutely walloped with natural disasters in the last probably 10 years. We own a little bit of river country, so we deal with flood. 2021 and 2, I don't know how many times the river came out of its banks, and so there is major possibility of natural disasters causing us a lot of issues because of renewable energy. Like, I'm very concerned, and Grant will be able to speak to this more, but during Sir Ivan, the amount of aerial support that we got fighting the fire was unbelievable. Without that, I don't know where it would have ever ended. Saved homes, saved livestock, saved infrastructure. I don't know what will happen, but with, as Grant said, 1,000 wind turbines in this area, are we just going to be a no-go zone? Transmission lines? What happens on the ground when you're a firefighter on the ground and you're near a solar factory? I don't know what rural firefighting is going to look like in the next 10 years if this happens, because, fighting a fire on the ground in any situation is dangerous and scary and all of those things. And Sir Ivan was like nothing I'd ever seen, and like nothing I hope to ever see again. But when you think that the last major one was 1980, there's every chance that it will happen again. And it's interesting, the RFS, the bureaucrats, it's just like every other government organisation. They won't come out and make a statement about what it will actually look like. I mean, who's going to put a pilot in the sky in smoke is thick that you can't see anything? Even if, they say they stop the wind turbines and that transmission lines aren't an issue, but I wouldn't put anyone knowingly in that kind of danger to fight a fire in that kind of area. So does that just mean we lose all aerial support, which makes ground firefighting so much more difficult? It's scary to think what could happen to us in a major bushfire if all of this does go ahead.
Well, you see the plumes of smoke, and even here in Sydney, when there's a big bushfire, there's plumes of smoke that even covers Sydney. What does that do to wind turbines? Does that mess with their
I mean, you've seen obviously pictures of wind turbines catching fire or something. I mean, there's hundreds of litres of oil and cooling fluid and stuff in the head of the turbine, and like any mechanical thing, they break if they're not maintained or something goes wrong. So as a source of fire, they're a problem, and the impediment to firefighting is like aerial firefighting in particular, is like Emma said. I'm a pilot and I flew C-130s in the Air Force, which is one of the tankers that they use, which is the type that crashed down the Snowy Mountains back in 2019-20. And I saw them working in the Sir Ivan fire as well, and they dropped from well below 500 feet. To hit the target, they dropped below 500 feet at the front of the fire. Obviously, if it's obscured by smoke or what have you, well, they've got to stay clear of that. But they're not going to go anywhere near turbines if there's smoke or turbulence or what have you. They're not going to weave their way between turbines. They're going to stay outside the project boundaries and drop there. And people say, oh, they can drop from above the turbines, but these turbines are 850, 900 feet tall. And then you provide a buffer above that if you can see the turbine. So you're dropping above 1,000 feet above ground level. It'll be a waste of time. It won't be effective. It won't hit where it needs to hit. So yes, it will be left to the ground volunteers to fight, and that's us. It's not some mythical force that appears. The RFS is us. And so you'll have us who didn't want the project, could foresee the problems, being compelled to go and fight inside the turbine areas or waiting for it to come out of the turbine areas onto our land when we could have stopped it inside the turbine area. So it's really inequitable that we've been flagging this, and I've presented this to numerous committees, and that this risk, and it's just not acknowledged by officially. It's not acknowledged by the RFS, that they just don't want to. That they don't want to offend the government and say this is dangerous or it's not going to work. They just say, oh, it'll be handled by normal risk management, aviation risk management. But aviation risk management will say you don't go there, like Emma said. As far as solar goes, there's been a solar farm in Gilgandra. I think it's had a couple of fires through it, Beryl. And the RFS, you can't go into the farm to fight it because there's no room to manoeuvre between the panels. So you have to wait at the outside for it to burn itself out or come out. and then the smoke is toxic from the panels and the contamination to the soil. So once again, you can't actually get in there to fight it. You just got to wait and then avoid the smoke and the residue. I think they even put a notice out for people to stay indoors because of the toxic smoke. And then we've all seen pictures now of batteries, lithium and cars going up. And again, you can't put them out. You just got to wait. You douse them in foam or something, and you protect the surrounding area. You stay out of the fumes. So we're creating these problems. We're embedding them everywhere across the country, and there is no strategy to manage them. And there are no, there isn't the manpower or the trained manpower in the regions to fight them. And it's a bit off the side, but it's interesting in that, like, I'm a member of the RFS. Emma's a member of the RFS. I mean, you're basically a member from the time you can hold a hose. And we're expected to volunteer our time even to go to motor vehicle accidents or to do the rural firefighting, which we don't mind because we see that as part of the job. And then in town, like for example in Coolah, the fire station, they do not have a single uniformed full-time fireman employed in town. It is the town fire brigade is 100% volunteers from the town. And Dunedoo, I think, is the same, and Merriwa, I think, is the same. So you don't even have professional full-time firefighters in our local towns now. So why do we pay the fire services levy on our insurances in all your insurance bills if we're providing that service anyway? We're not getting a service from Macquarie Street. And that goes further to insurance. If you're joining one of these projects that is written down at millions of dollars or billions of dollars value, how do you get farm insurance? Because if a fire starts on your property and then rips through a $1 billion solar farm next door, the risk is you're going to be liable. We've heard people have investigated this, and we've heard that people can't get insurance. So that's an issue that hasn't been addressed at government level yet. And besides all the practical issues of living next to this stuff. So there's so much that it's just up in the air and is unsettling, and it's an impediment on your future business.
But if you were to present that information, the information you're talking about, the solar panels, you're not being able to put them out, and you just basically have to sit there and watch them burn and put up with the toxic fumes. If you presented that information to one of the Teal members of Parliament or the Greens, they'd just brush you off and say, "Oh, you're just fear mongering. It's just nonsense. That's not going to happen." Blah blah blah. They just palm it off. Whereas you guys out there in these communities, as you said, you're both in the rural fire service. You know what happens when you have bushfires and the circumstances around them. Who's listening to you? Who's coming out to talk to you? I mean, I know we are running out of time, and you've been heavily involved with the Reckless Renewables rallies, and I have one of these articles that came out afterwards from the Sydney Morning Herald, basically criticizing the rally and trying to minimize its effect and call everyone conspiracy theorists. It's picking up on a line that Ralph Babette talked about eating bugs, and they've honed in on that one point to discredit the whole rally and the whole message that the Reckless Renewables rally was trying to get across, and raising a lot of the issues that both of you have raised tonight. But has this journalist, or has any other journalist from Sydney or Melbourne or other city areas, or politicians from those areas ever come out to your areas to look at these issues face to face with you guys and on the ground? Has that happened at all, Grant?
Look, I'm grumpier than Emma in that I haven't bothered pursuing the politicians too much, or the bureaucrats, because I guess I sort of wrote them off a while back. Emma's still wet behind the ears. No, Emma's good, but it's just I've basically lost faith in the system making sensible decisions, unfortunately. Until you can, hold them, to account, they basically don't listen. But politicians aren't volunteering to come out here and push this stuff because they know it's toxic in the electorates, I think. And the adjoining electorates that aren't in the res, they're talking about passing motions and stuff about restricting all renewables to within reses and things like that. They know it's not wanted by the population, the broader population in their area. Emma's, she can tell you what she's been doing, but she's been liaising a lot more with the established organisations and has got some good results in questioning in the committees in the New South Wales Parliament and various things. So it's certainly that's been good to see, and it has had some impact. But those same people haven't come out here. Senator Cadell, I guess, must mention, and maybe some of the others that Emma's spoken with haven't come out here. Like even the undergrounding inquiry, they went and sat in Armidale, and I drove 4.5 hours to get up there to present to that first up. The second one, they didn't come out here to the Central West Orana res either. But we're the lead res, but the undergrounding inquiry didn't come near us. You had to go to Sydney. So once again, I sort of think the CWO res is slipping through a bit unnoticed and on the quiet as the lead res, and they're sort of determined to get it done. But I'll let Emma talk about who she's spoken to and what politicians have taken an interest in our cause more directly.
So I think I have met with a couple of ministers. Minister Sharp and the Treasurer did come out to Dunedoo in February, and Minister Moriarty, who's the Minister for Ag, she did come out, I think it was September last year. Minister Moriarty, we did take her for a look around the transmission affected area, told her all our concerns. My honest opinion is not a lot came from that. Minister Sharp and the Treasurer listened to our concerns about, they spoke to transmission affected landowners, listened to how they'd been treated. Again, has a lot changed on the ground? Not at this point. I mean, I suppose that's only probably 5 weeks ago, but I'm getting more and more cynical as the days wear on. I think I've had some other good conversations with some members of Parliament, some members of the Legislative Council, people who have listened to what we're saying. Those are obviously ongoing, and I hope something might come of them. I think a point I will raise is, and I keep going back to Sir Ivan, that was a big, that was a big time for us. That was hard. I think what you're saying, Stephen, is exactly right. Who were the people that picked up the pieces after that? Who were the people that shot half-burnt livestock, that buried them all, that put people's fences back up? That was us. That was community members. That wasn't members of the RFS. That wasn't members of the Department of Planning. That wasn't ministers. We're the ones that bear the brunt of this and have to clean up the mess afterwards. To me, that is not fair. And I think you're right. Maybe if they all came out here and walked in our shoes for 3 or 4 weeks, or maybe if we cut the food supply off for a month, they would realise what we contribute to this country and how passionate we are about our land. I mean, the Minister for Environment is meant to look after the environment. I don't know of many farmers that would label themselves environmentalists, but if we don't care for our land, we don't make any money. So it doesn't pay us not to look after what we've got and our livestock. And it's not just about making money. That most of us, that's what we love. So I think, that comes down to another huge issue, is that all of the assessment for these projects is so urban centralized. You don't get people out here assessing these projects that know about agriculture, that know about the impacts to us. Like I said to you earlier, when the Golden Highway upgrade was happening, we had it suggested to us that maybe instead of walking the stock across the road, we should truck them across the road. That can turn a 5, 10, 15-minute job into a 2-day job, depending on how big the mob you want to move is. Like, and that is what we're facing. People that don't understand what we do or how we live or how our communities function are the ones that are making the decisions about whether all of the big stuff, everything that happens in our area. And it seems that agriculture just gets a kick in the guts every other day with every policy that comes up.
Well, I've talked about this before. I've spoken at both Reckless Renewables rallies, and I've brought this up there. I've spoken about this on other podcasts, but I suppose when you get tired of saying it, people actually start to listen. So you just have to keep repeating this. This is on Zali Steggall's website. Obviously, Zali Steggall is a teal that is the member of parliament for Warringah here in the Northern Beaches and Mossman and those areas. And she says right here about when talking about solar panels and wind farms in Warringah, I do not support wind farms along Warringah's beachfront. And down here, it's written on her website, it's unfortunate that such an important issue as the climate crisis is trivialized by some and reduced to my personal use of solar panels, the car I drive, and a joke petition to put windmills on Manly Beach. Now, for you guys out there facing all this stuff, it's not a joke, is it?
No, it's insulting in the extreme, and I don't think it's a calculated insult. I think it's just out of sheer ignorance, really, and they don't even realise that they're wearing blinkers, and what they're saying is inequitable or hypocritical, and that's the point. It's partly is that I think it's just genuine ignorance. They don't even realise that they're offending us. I mean, at an early meeting we had out here a few years ago, the head of energyco came out.
Well, sorry, Grant, it's not even an offence. The Teals are pushing a policy of transitioning to renewables and reducing emissions by 75%. So the reasons you guys have a regional energy zone, a renewable energy zone, and these projects that are happening are because of politicians like this. They're the ones pushing it.
Well, it is, but Zali Steggall's never been in power. I mean, I agree. I don't agree with their policies, but they've capitalised on the indecision and fecklessness of the Liberal National Party to not make sensible arguments and stand their ground when we, who sort of their natural constituents, expect them to, but they've sold us out. So, Zali wouldn't be able to get away if the Liberal National politicians stood up and said, well, we're not going to roll with this idiocy. We're going to do stuff that's sensible. But the trouble is they keep rolling with it and then you get people like Adam Marshall and Matt Keane and those sorts of people inside. You hope people that know better, or a party that should know better, but they don't seem to, and they facilitate this. I mean, it should never have got to this point of Zali Steggall writing anything like that, and it should never have got to the point where we're defending our land against this sort of impact. And that should have been stopped 10, 15, 20 years ago, we think, by the coalition party, but they've always facilitated it, or they've always rolled over. And so primarily I lay the blame at them. Zali Steggall's an opportunist, and the people backing her, but the Nationals and Liberals let that situation develop to this point of stupidity.
So we're right at the end now, but you also wanted to talk about the national electricity law. Did you want to touch on that?
I'll finish on a high note. All right, just for background, I mean, it's just so the national electricity law is adopted across all the eastern states where the national electricity market and the grid operates, from South Australia to North Queensland. And few people would know that the national electricity law is actually an act of parliament in South Australia. And so whatever South Australia passes gets automatically adopted in all the other eastern states and territories. It doesn't get debated in New South Wales Parliament. So the South Australian Parliament passes any amendments to the law and it gets adopted by everyone else without any public fanfare or any debate in most cases. Where does that come from? the direction sort of comes indirectly from what used to be called the COAG Energy Council, but it's now the Energy and Climate Change Ministerial Council, which is the energy ministers of all the states and territories, and I think it includes New Zealand now for some reason. So they put the overarching direction together, and then it makes its way into an act of parliament in South Australia, and then it flows through to the other states and territories without really much review or public comment. And so that's how we get led by the nose on this. So it's funny. It just shows what a high level you have to have your eyes on the right thing at the right time to find out what's going to come down the chute in a few years. And so I think few people would know that that's how it works. But apparently, that's how it is.
Yeah, I didn't know that either, but I do know that there's other national laws. We've spoken about the creation of APRA in the medical industry is from the Queensland. Queensland passes the legislation, and then the rest of the states adopt it. So there's a number of these going around. You think everything that's national comes from the federal government, but that's not quite the case. Some of these adoption laws are present in the state parliaments, and I guess that's how they sneak these things through. But I guess we better finish up now. I might just ask you, Emma. What are you hoping to achieve from this, or is there any final message? I'm sure there's a lot of people living in city areas, living in electorates that have members of parliament that are pushing these policies, and a lot of people probably don't even know they probably have never heard of a REZ area or a renewable energy zone or anything like that. What's your final message for people listening out there?
Look, Stephen, I think a really important thing is, the NIMBY phrase, the not in my backyard. That's certainly not where I come from, and I know that's not where Grant's coming from, and it's the same with a lot of people in our situation. This isn't about this not being in our backyard. This is about this not happening to anyone, because of the upheaval, the major issues with logistics of it happening haven't been ironed out. And I know the government has signed agreements to get to net zero by 2050, but mining in this country is not going to stop because it is too valuable to our economy. I just think it's important to think about the people on the ground that this is happening to. It might not be you, it might not be your friends, it might not be your family, but the families that this is happening to are real people. We have real feelings. We work really hard to do what we do and, keep our heritage. 200 years is a long time. There's a lot of people that have worked really hard their whole lives to have a profitable business to hand on to their kids or grandkids or whatever. And it's very difficult to have that taken away from you without your choice, or, the way that you live taken away from you without your choice. Like, yes, we work hard, but we decided to live here. We decided to do this. We have a really good lifestyle, in my opinion. And I think, it's really difficult to have the choices that you've made taken away from you. And like I said to you before, it seems agriculture gets a kick in the guts from every angle, everywhere you turn. So I think while we need to be careful about our environment, I think it would be really nice to think about the people that it affects, and it would have been nice to have consultation with us and include us, not just inform us, but include us in the decision making. And we're practical people. We're not. Most of us aren't professors or long-term uni goers or studies. We're practical. We have to be a vet and a mechanic and everything else on a daily basis because nothing ever goes to plan out here. So we're problem solvers. So give us a chance to do that, and maybe we could come up with something really incredible that would help reach any targets we need to reach, but not have the impacts on us that we might not be able to come back from.
And unfortunately, for instance, prime agricultural land, there's no coming back if you ruin that. So it's gone forever. So, Grant, I know you're tremendously involved in this. I mean, you're the chair of the National Rational Energy Network at a tremendous cost to you with your time, and I'm sure a lot of effort that's gone into it. What's your final message for people listening tonight or today?
Well, I touched on it before, as I think, like Emma said, we're practical people. I mean, things have to work here. We need, you need to plant the crop, you need to spray the crop, you need to harvest the crop. It's not in the bank until you sell the damn thing. Things have to work. We can't kid ourselves with ideology. We can't kid ourselves with good thoughts or belief. It's reality. And we don't see that same rigor in government or the bureaucracy or in a lot of these private firms. We make every dollar in the bank that we've got, we know where it came from. We know the sheep, we know the cattle, we know the crop, we know where it came from. It didn't come from winning a government contract or a guaranteed return on building a power line that we didn't need. We know where every dollar comes from. Now, I could get behind something if I thought it would work and it was a good solution, maybe not the best solution, but a good solution. But this is so far from being a good solution to the stated problem that being asked to cop it sweet for the greater good just won't wash, because this is a terrible solution to anything, and it's completely counterproductive. And that's the message, is that people need to look at the true whole of life cost of this agenda and realise that it's not going to achieve what they've been told. And so if they support it because it's going to reduce emissions, well, they need to look at that and satisfy themselves that it's not going to happen that way, and they need to look for something that will work. Because, I mean, that's the resistance. I think most landowners, we're practical people. We might not say it, but we just don't believe this is a sensible solution. And so we're not going to fall into line and cop it sweet. We're going to push back and resist as long as we can, because it's just another great white elephant at great expense to the citizenry of the country and the state. So please look a bit deeper and let's find a real solution.
Well, thank God for people like you that are pushing back in all around the country. I mean, the National Rational Energy Network represents hundreds of smaller groups and community groups that have come together to push back against all these things. I mean, we haven't even talked about offshore wind farms and other projects that are happening around the nation that are only the result of this mad rush to renewable energy. But if people like yourselves and other people out there weren't standing up, and as you said, Emma, you're not professionals in terms of being professors or lawyers or anything like that. You're just everyday people trying to make a good fist of this and pushing back in any which way that you can. There's no money behind you. I mean, some of these news articles you read, they talk about you being funded by the coal and oil industry. It's just laughable, because the coal and oil industry, I'm sure they're using their funds to invest in renewable energy, because that seems to be where the money is. But I mean, it's a tough battle, but it can be won with good people like yourselves standing up and getting people together and rallying the troops and petitioning your local MPs and sending them letters and holding your rallies and holding your events and everything that you're doing. So I just really want to commend you guys for everything that you've done up until this point. And I know it's tough. I know it's hard, and I know it's a tremendous personal cost to both of you and everyone who's involved. But you have to keep doing it, because at the end of the day, whether people like it or not, the country relies on people like you to get politically active and whether they realize that you're doing a good thing or not. I mean, it's tremendously important that you guys are doing what you're doing. So I just wanted to thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, we'll battle on. And going back to those articles like came out after the Canberra rally, but you notice that none of them addressed the technical issues. None of them talked about the fallacy of the whole thing. You know, it's all sticks and stones stuff, etc. So, you know, once again, they don't want to talk about the real practical issues. They just want to sling mud and sit back on the ideology again.
Yeah, they'll pick up on one little thing that someone said a little bit out of line or a little bit off topic, and they'll focus on that. They never want to talk about as you said, the nuts and bolts of what's really happening, the technical side of things. They can't win that argument. They just can't. So they have to smear. They have to fight it on emotion. They have to instill fear in people. I mean, especially the kids. I mean, I keep hearing all this data coming out about mental health, specifically with young kids. About they're terrified about growing up in a world that's going to end because of climate change and all this sort of stuff. It's such a tremendous cost that comes along with all of this. So it is really quite sad. But I want to direct everyone to there's a Facebook group. It's the Reckless Renewables Facebook group. If you want to head there and keep up to date with everything that Grant's doing and the people that are involved in the Reckless Renewables and the National Rational Energy Network. I don't know who came up with that name, Grant.
That would be me.
It's technically sound, but it's a tongue twister. That's for sure. But yeah, head to that Facebook
I tried a few
group.
others, but they're all taken.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, look, it's memorable at least. I'm sure people won't forget it. So, look, thank you guys for both coming on. If anyone wants to get involved, head to that Facebook group. You're also pushing for a Senate inquiry as well. Is that right?
Yeah, we'd like a Senate inquiry into the whole AMO integrated system plan. Look at it closely and technically from a technical viewpoint. That's what we'd like to give that an airing. Yeah,
okay. Well, as I said before, if anyone's watching, go to that Facebook site. Even email your local politician and let them know that you're that a lot of the issues that we raised, as Grant said, some of these are technical issues that these politicians can't explain. So maybe send them an email and just ask them a few questions about what would happen in a bushfire with wind turbines, and what would happen if a bushfire went through a solar project, and how would it be protected by the firefighters? Would they be able to protect it? You need to get active and ask our politicians these questions. But for everyone watching, thank you very much. We'll be back next week, and thank you for Emma and Grant for your contribution. I mean, as I said, it's incredibly important, and we'll see you all next time. Thank you very much for watching.
Thank you.